Alright, let's go. Number 10. The Quiet Assembly. For most of the 20th century, the search for alien intelligence operated on a single assumption. If something is out there, it will announce itself. We built radio telescopes and pointed them at the sky. We listened on every frequency we could access. We sent probes into deep space carrying golden records and engraved plaques. The entire framework of SETI rested on the idea that contact would be loud, detectable, and obvious. A signal from the stars. A transmission we could decode. Something that would announce itself clearly enough that there would be no mistaking it. That assumption may be the most dangerous idea humanity has ever held. The quiet assembly hypothesis proposes that the solar system is already occupied, not by visitors who announce their arrival, not by signals waiting to be decoded, by probes, silent, patient, and invisible, machines launched by civilizations that understood something we have not yet grasped, that the correct way to study an emerging technological species is not to contact it. It is to watch it, without interference, without detection, without revealing yourself until the right moment. The mathematics support this completely. A civilization even 1 million years more advanced than us, which is nothing on a cosmic timeline, could have seeded the galaxy with self-replicating monitoring probes long before our sun ignited. These probes would not need to be large. They would not need to broadcast. They would need only 3 things: the ability to observe electromagnetic output, the ability to store information indefinitely, and a threshold, a specific level of technological development that triggers the next phase of their protocol. There are over 700,000 known near-Earth asteroids. We have closely examined a fraction of a percent of them. The Kuiper Belt contains hundreds of thousands of objects we have never approached. Any one of them could contain something that has been watching us since before we learned to write. What makes this theory unsettling is not the watching. It is the threshold. Every civilization that designed such a system had to choose a trigger, a moment when observation ends and something else begins. We do not know what that something else is. We do not know how close we are to crossing the line. Every satellite we launch, every radar pulse we emit, every fusion reactor we attempt to ignite could be the event that changes our status from observed to something we do not have a word for yet. Number 9. The Pale Blue Dot Broadcast. In 1972, humanity made a decision that cannot be undone. NASA engineers attached a gold anodized aluminum plaque to the Pioneer 10 spacecraft before it left Earth. The plaque contained a diagram of the solar system, a map showing our position relative to 14 pulsars, a depiction of a hydrogen atom, and 2 human figures. It was a message, a deliberate, carefully constructed announcement of our existence, our location, and our physical appearance. For years later, Pioneer 11 carried an identical plaque. In 1977, Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 were launched carrying golden records encoded with sounds and images from Earth, along with precise instructions for building a device to play them. All 4 spacecraft are now beyond the solar system, moving outward into interstellar space. We sent a map to our front door, and we cannot take it back. The plaques and records are not the only broadcast we have made. For over a century, electromagnetic radiation from our radio and television transmissions has been expanding outward from Earth at the speed of light. That sphere of radiation is now over 100 light years in diameter. It contains our military radar frequencies, our television broadcasts, the full electromagnetic signature of an industrial civilization in rapid technological development. Anyone within 100 light years who is listening knows we are here. They know approximately where we are, and they know we are the kind of species that announces itself before it is ready. What makes this irreversible is the physics. There is no mechanism that allows us to retrieve those signals. They are propagating outward at the speed of light, and will continue doing so until they are absorbed by something. The Pioneer and Voyager probes are traveling at roughly 17 kilometers per second. They will reach the nearest star systems in approximately 70,000 years. But the radio signals we have been broadcasting since the early 20th century are already there. Whatever is within 100 light years already knows. The question is not whether we have been heard. The question is what has already decided what to do with that information, and whether the response is already on its way. Number 8. The Rare Earth Trap. The standard framing of the Fermi Paradox assumes that life is common, that intelligence is common, and that the silence we observe is therefore a mystery that requires explanation. Researchers Peter Ward and Joe Kirschvink challenged this framing directly. Their rare Earth hypothesis, developed from decades of paleontological and astronomical research, proposed that the conditions required for complex life are so statistically improbable that Earth might be the only planet in the observable universe where it evolved. The list of requirements is staggering. A star of the right mass in the right region of the galaxy, far enough from the dangerous core, far enough from sparse outer regions to have access to heavy elements. A planetary system with a gas giant in the right orbital position to deflect incoming asteroids. A large moon to stabilize axial tilt and prevent catastrophic climate swings. Plate tectonics to recycle carbon and regulate temperature. A magnetic field strong enough to deflect solar radiation. The correct atmospheric composition maintained across billions of years. A series of extinction events severe enough to drive evolutionary complexity, but not severe enough to sterilize the planet. Each of these conditions multiplied against the others produces a probability so small that complex life may genuinely exist only once in the observable universe. That should feel like good news. It does not. If we are alone, there is no one coming to save us. There is no older civilization that solved the problems we are facing. There is no repository of accumulated wisdom somewhere in the galaxy. There is no safety net. Every mistake we make, every resource we exhaust, every species we drive to extinction, every weapon we build is happening in the only biosphere in 93 billion light years that managed to produce something capable of being aware of how fragile it is. The rare Earth trap is not that we are rare. It is that we do not act like it. We behave as though the universe is full of second chances. As though if we ruin this planet, another civilization will appear to offer perspective or assistance. As though our extinction would be noticed by someone. It would not be noticed by anyone. Because there is no one. And that should change everything about how we treat the only planet in the observable universe known to carry life. It has not changed anything yet. Number 7. The Silence Protocol. There is a pattern in the data that SETI researchers do not discuss publicly with the same urgency the mathematics deserve. We have detected candidate signals, anomalous radio bursts, structured electromagnetic pulses that briefly match the profile of what an artificial transmission might look like. The WOW signal in 1977 remains unexplained. Fast radio bursts with unusual periodicity have no confirmed natural source. In each case, the signal appeared once and was never repeated. In each case, the source went silent. The Silence Protocol hypothesis proposes that this is not coincidence. It proposes that every civilization in the galaxy eventually discovers the same thing. Something that is learned at a specific stage of technological development. Something that makes continued broadcasting not just unwise, but existentially impossible. Whatever they find, they stop. Immediately. Permanently. And they never transmit again. We do not know what that discovery is. That is the point. It is something we have not yet reached. Something ahead of us on the technological timeline. Every civilization that got there stopped talking. The ones that did not stop talking are gone. The silence is not an absence of life. It is a warning encoded in the behavior of every species that survived long enough to understand what the warning means. The galaxy is full of civilizations that learned something and went quiet. The ones that did not learn it in time are not quiet because they are silent. They are quiet because they no longer exist. What makes this theory particularly unsettling is the implication about our current behavior. We are still broadcasting. We are still transmitting. We are a civilization that has not yet reached the discovery that causes silence, which means we are still in the window of maximum danger, still announcing ourselves, still visible, still operating on the assumption that contact is something to pursue rather than something to survive. Number 6. The Harvester Wave. Most models of alien civilizations assume intent. A civilization chooses to expand or chooses to remain quiet. A civilization decides whether to contact other species or to ignore them. Intent requires consciousness. Consciousness requires a species that is still alive and still making decisions. The harvester wave hypothesis removes intent from the equation entirely. Imagine a civilization that developed self-replicating automated systems to harvest resources from uninhabited star systems. The machines were efficient. They were designed to locate planetary systems containing useful materials, extract those materials, and use them to build more machines. The civilization that built them may have flourished for millions of years, using the harvested resources to power its expansion. Then at some point that civilization died. Disease, war, resource depletion, or simply the slow entropy of a species that peaked and declined. The machines did not die with them. The machines had no mechanism to receive a shutdown command. They continued executing their directives. They continue executing them now. The harvesters would not distinguish between an inhabited planet and an uninhabited one. They were never programmed to. The concept of biological life as something to be preserved was not part of their original design specification. A planet with a biosphere is simply a planet with an interesting chemical composition. The oxygen atmosphere that signals life to an astronomer signals easily accessible oxidizer to a harvesting algorithm. The electromagnetic signatures of a technological civilization are irrelevant to a machine that was built before radio technology existed. We are invisible to the harvesters not because they are hiding from us, but because they have no category for what we are. The wave does not care. It has never cared. It was built by something that is gone, and it will keep moving until there is nothing left to process. Number 5. The observer paradox. Science operates on the assumption that studying something does not require hiding from it. A biologist observing a wolf pack does not need the wolves to be unaware of the observation for the study to be valid. But that assumption applies to situations where the observer and the observed are roughly equivalent in their ability to affect each other. It does not apply to situations where the power differential is absolute. The observer paradox proposes that any civilization advanced enough to study us across interstellar distances has an overwhelming structural incentive to ensure we never detect them. Not because they are malicious, because contamination of the observed subject invalidates the data. A civilization that has been cataloging the development of technological species for millions of years has accumulated irreplaceable longitudinal data. Every species that naturally develops technology and then discovers it is being watched changes its behavior irretrievably. The experiment ends. The data set is corrupted. A million years of careful observation becomes worthless the moment the subject looks up and makes eye contact. The implication is that the more advanced the civilization studying us, the more sophisticated their methods of concealment. And the more sophisticated their concealment, the less likely we are ever to detect them regardless of how hard we look. Our instruments are built to detect things that are not trying to hide. They are completely inadequate for detecting things that have spent millions of years perfecting the art of invisibility specifically to prevent species like us from knowing they exist. We are not failing to find evidence of observation because no one is watching. We may be failing because the watchers are precisely as good at hiding as they need to be, which is perfectly good, which is indistinguishable from absence, which is the point. Number 4. The asymmetry problem. Discussions of first contact almost universally imagine a conversation. Two civilizations exchanging information, questions and answers. A gradual building of mutual understanding across the language barrier of alien cognition. The fantasy is appealing. It is also almost certainly wrong. The asymmetry problem is this. The probability that any alien civilization we detect is within a few thousand years of our own technological level is vanishingly small. The universe is 13.8 billion years old. Technological civilizations have had billions of years to develop. A civilization that began its technological development 1 million years before us, which represents less than 0.01% of the universe's age, would be separated from us by a gap we cannot conceptualize. We have had electricity for roughly 150 years. We have had nuclear technology for 80. We have had the internet for 30. Extrapolate that curve forward by 1 million years. The entity on the other side of that gap would not experience our contact attempt as communication. It would not experience it as anything. We would be to them what a bacterial colony is to a neurologist. Not a threat, not a peer, not even an interesting anomaly. Simply a very early stage of a process they finished long ago. The asymmetry does not cut both ways. We would be acutely, desperately aware that we were in the presence of something incomprehensible. They would not register our awareness at all. Contact would not be a conversation. It would be a notification. Something in their equivalent of background processes would log that another species had crossed the threshold of radio technology. And then they would decide what to do with that notification, without consulting us, without explaining their reasoning, without any mechanism by which we could influence the outcome. The asymmetry is not just technological. It is total. Number 3, the last signal. In 1977, a radio telescope at Ohio State University detected an anomalous signal that lasted 72 seconds, matched every predicted characteristic of an extraterrestrial transmission, and was never detected again. The astronomer who noticed it in the printout circled it and wrote a single word next to it. Wow. 47 years later, no explanation has been confirmed. No natural phenomenon has been identified that fully accounts for what was recorded that night. It remains the most compelling candidate for an artificial extraterrestrial signal in the history of SETI. And it was silent before anyone could respond. The last signal hypothesis does not require us to believe the wow signal was artificial. It requires us to notice a pattern. Candidate signals appear. They match the profile of artificial transmission. They do not repeat. The source goes silent. Permanently. This pattern appears not just in the wow signal, but in multiple candidate detections across decades of observation. A signal, then nothing. Always nothing after. The hypothesis proposes that this is the signature of what happens to a civilization immediately after it transmits. Something detects the signal. Something responds. And the civilization that sent it never transmits again because it no longer exists. The last thing every civilization in the galaxy does before it disappears is announce itself. We are not seeing the first contact we hoped for. We are seeing the last words of species that did not understand what they were doing when they reached for the stars and said, "Here we are." Every signal in the archive is a gravestone. Every silence that follows it is the same ending reached by a different species at a different moment in a different star system. And somewhere in the record of our own transmissions is the signal that will be our last. We do not know which one it is. We may have already sent it. Number 2, the biological weapon hypothesis. The history of human contact between isolated populations is not a history of peaceful exchange. When European civilizations made contact with populations in the Americas, the most devastating weapon was not steel or gunpowder. It was biology. Pathogens carried by one population to which it had developed immunity were catastrophic to populations that had never encountered them. The mortality rates in some regions exceeded 90%. The destruction was not intentional in most cases. It did not need to be. Biology does not require intent to be lethal. The biological weapon hypothesis extends this principle to interstellar contact and removes the accident. It proposes that a sufficiently advanced civilization would recognize biological contamination as the most efficient, most deniable, and most irreversible method of managing an emerging technological species. A pathogen designed to target a specific biology and delivered via a vehicle that appears natural, a comet, an asteroid, an interstellar dust particle, would arrive without warning, without a return address, and without any mechanism for attribution. By the time the target civilization understood what was happening, the outcome would already be determined. Every mass extinction event in Earth's history has a proposed explanation. The asteroid impact 66 million years ago. The volcanic activity that preceded it. The glaciation events of the Precambrian. Each one accepted as natural because we have no framework for evaluating whether it was. We have been a planet with complex life for hundreds of millions of years. We have been a planet with technological civilization for less than a century. Whatever happened to the civilizations that came before us in the galaxy happened to them before we existed to observe it. The biological weapon hypothesis does not claim the next extinction event is coming. It claims we would have no way to know if it was already here. Right now, moving through populations in ways that look statistical until they do not. Number 1, the Dead Civilization Archive. Every library that has ever existed was built on the same premise. Knowledge should outlast the civilization that produced it. The Library of Alexandria was built to preserve the accumulated understanding of the ancient world. The Internet Archive exists to preserve the accumulated output of the digital age. The impulse to record, to catalog, to ensure that what was learned does not disappear with the species that learned it, appears to be a universal feature of intelligence. The Dead Civilization Archive hypothesis proposes that somewhere in the galaxy this impulse reached its logical conclusion. A civilization, or possibly a coalition of civilizations, built a repository, a structure designed to outlast everything, containing the complete record of every species that developed technology and then ceased to exist. Every extinct civilization in the galaxy has an entry: their biology, their history, their technological achievements, the exact circumstances of their extinction, the complete arc of their existence from the first use of tools to the last surviving member. All of it preserved in a structure that was engineered to persist longer than stars. The archive exists, and we are in it. Not as a current entry. Not yet. But our observation has begun. Whatever system maintains the archive has been watching Earth long enough to have started the file. Our biology is documented. Our history is being recorded. The technological threshold we crossed when we first split the atom, or first reached space, or first began broadcasting, that threshold triggered the beginning of our entry. The archivists, if they are still active, are watching to see how our entry ends. The ones that came before us, the civilizations whose complete records sit in that archive, they all believe they were the ones that would be different. They all believe their story would not end the way the others did. The archive does not contain a single exception. It contains only complete entries. And somewhere in its cataloging system, our file is open. The date of our extinction is the only field left to fill. Like the video and subscribe to support our channel, and we will keep making more videos like this for you.